Welcome to We're All Gonna Die and Other Fun Facts, a semi-regular, occasionally amusing, and rarely funny series of conversations on a random topic. This episode is entitled Dr. Hazel Contains Multitudes, and it is about someone who certainly encompasses academia, specifically the sciences, music, visual arts, embroidery, publishing zines, just all the things that this person does. And our guest for this episode is someone who knows something about Dr. Hazel and the way in which she contains multitudes. And it's Dr. Hazel. Hi, welcome.
Greetings. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for... So I guess maybe I did a very bad job of explaining everything. Could you just say all the things you do? Like, that's the first interview question.
Yeah. So let's see. Professionally or by trade, and the way that a lot of people know me is, or at least know me at first, would be as a botanist and forest ecologist, adjunct instructor at multiple schools on those topics. But I also do research on them too. I'm involved with a variety of botanical clubs and organizations. And let's see. If the other way that you might know me would be through punk activities. I make zines. I am in a band again as of like a week and a half ago, and go to shows a whole lot, including random ones out of town quite regularly. And then I also do a variety of other creative pursuits. I plant stuff outside. I used to work in public gardens. I don't anymore, but I still do gardening as a hobby. And a variety of needlework things. Mostly I do embroidery these days. I do crochet too, and sew too, but the embroidery and the adjacent sewing is what takes up most of my needlework interest at the moment. And along with that, I ended up starting drawing again, so I draw leaves.
And publish zines.
And publish zines.
So it's also photography at those shows.
True. I don't really consider myself a real photographer, but I guess you could say that.
Yeah. So that's a lot, and thinking about the energy that takes, and the desire and the effort that all that takes, and I guess to sort of unpack, because we were also talking before in our sort of pre-recording conversation, the way in which all of these things are interrelated.
Yeah, very much so.
And so I guess the first thing I want to unpack is, and as a fellow academic, the draw, the pull, the interest in botany. Like, what sparked that? How did you get... What was the magnetic pull, I guess? I mean, I have my origin story about English, but...
Yeah, the botany origin story, there kind of isn't really one story to it. Basically, from the time I was really young, I was encouraged to pay attention to the world around me and practice my observation skills, and so that really included everything. It wasn't just plants. The first real interest that I remember would be mushrooms around the time that I was 3-ish maybe, and so I had this mushroom field guide that I would be looking through, and I couldn't read any of it, but I would be looking over the photos and symbols and make my parents read me the pages about these different mushrooms over and over again. We had a lot of these really cool illustrated children's books with really detailed drawings of hedgerows and forests, and they were full of mushrooms, and I would go through and I would count the mushrooms, both as individuals and the number of different types of mushrooms. So we could call that my first foray into collecting population biology data sets, in a way.
Wow. So, which I think is fascinating. So, what does one learn from a population biology data set? Because you also publish a ton of research.
Yeah, and a lot of it involves counting things. Not mushrooms so much anymore, but we count plant stems, we count all kinds of other things, and when you count stuff and you know how many individuals of a given species or a given growth form are in a particular area, you can use that to answer so many different kinds of questions, and the ones that I really focus on are understanding how modern plant populations and communities develop through time, and especially in response to past land use human activity.
Oh, yes. So the slag heap.
Yes.
Tornado blowdown areas.
And also, like, for a lot of my research, it's forests that you might walk into now and think it's the woods. You know, it's been here forever. But most of the forest in our region has regrown on agricultural land that was cut after European colonization, farmed for a while. Then it wasn't profitable anymore. Nobody wants to work on the farm anymore because it sucks, so you move to cities for industrial jobs. And then the land is no longer farmed, forest regrows, and now we have a lot more forest cover than we would have had 100 years ago. But it's different from what would have been here before the land was cut and converted to agriculture. And that's kind of a central question of a lot of my research, is understanding what kind of legacy effects, as we call them, you would have in these forests that reflect what happened in them over the past 100, 200, however many years.
Yeah, I remember hearing that, like, even, you know, I guess even in the earlier part of the 19th century, because, like, just Pennsylvania and hardwood was just such a, like, ooh, hardwood, we can just, you know, make all of these. There's old pictures of Duquesne's campus of, like, the entire bluff was just a dirt pit.
Right. Yeah, that's what huge amounts of the modern forest we have would have looked like 100 years ago. A lot of them would have been logged. Many were converted to agriculture. One of the things that's interesting about our area is that our terrain is really variable and rugged. So there's a lot of spots that were not converted to agriculture. They were just cut and then maybe regrew as forest and were cut again, maybe not.
Wow.
But there's also a lot of areas, especially in flatter, gentler land, that were converted to different forms of agriculture. And where you have different forms of agriculture, you have different legacy effects. So if a site was cut and converted to pasturing, there's going to be some differences in the forests that regenerate there, as opposed to a site that was cut and converted to row crops.
Oh, wow. So is there any true old growth? I mean, I feel like, you know, because I know about these levels of expertise and stuff, and I know like 5 biology terms, and I'm going to throw, like, and I don't know if is this a real word? Like, the idea of an old growth forest? Is there any real old growth forest, like, in Pennsylvania or in this region?
So I warn my forestry students that I don't like that term because it's really vague. It's very popularly used, but nobody can really agree on what it actually means, because you can't say a forest was never impacted by humans, and that actually, there's a really lot of dark side of, like, weird colonial ideas that permeate a lot of our thinking about forests and the environment in this country and this continent, where it's like, if it was forest before Europeans got here and then the Europeans cut it, it was always forest beforehand, and that's not really true. And there's a lot of weird ideas about the landscape here being untouched by humans, when that's very, very untrue. So even some of our oldest remnant forests that we have today were certainly managed at some point before European colonization, and some of the concepts of old growth erase that in ways that are really unfortunate. But there's also, from a biological perspective, there's ways that forests change through time, and we can watch those changes happen, but they don't necessarily occur on a given set of years. So people will say, you know, it's old growth if it's 200 years old. It's old growth if it's 500 years old. It's old growth if it's never been cut. And it's like, there's no real consistency to that.
Oh, wow.
As far as old forests in Pennsylvania, there are quite a few that probably have been what I refer to as minimally disturbed, in heavy quotes, since the time of European colonization. The Cook Forest site is probably the most famous. That is a large collection of hemlock white pine forest that is one of the oldest remnants that we have in the state. But even that, it dates, I think, to the 1600s, because it regenerated after some sort of tornado or hurricane blowdown. You can core the trees, see how old they are, look at that age data, and see that if all your big trees in this old forest all date to 16 whatever, there had to be something that happened before then to initiate the development of that forest. So even in this very old stand, there was something that was there before it was this stand that we know of today.
Yeah, which makes me think too about how that makes you think differently about time. and non-anthropocentric time.
Very much so. And that's something that we think about in these legacy effects a whole lot, because let's say you have a forest that's 100 years old that regenerated on an abandoned pasture. The trees that are there, lifespans for a lot of tree species are easily over 100. So the composition of that forest, what species you have in it, how big the trees are, how they're distributed relative to each other, that's all still going to reflect the conditions that were present when that forest was regrowing 100 years ago. So the legacy effects that you see from land use can persist far longer than human lifespans. And one of the papers that I always tell everybody about when talking about land use history is from Europe, which has in some regards similar forest history to here in terms of converting to agriculture, widespread abandonment, and now more forests than we had 100 years ago. There's forests in, I believe it was Belgium or France, that somebody did a really awesome study on these old forest remnants and found that there's still legacies in what plants are growing where, influenced by agriculture and settlement patterns at the time of ancient Rome, many centuries, that then converted to forests many centuries before the present day.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's a long legacy.
That is a long legacy, and I guess then the other part about this is, for me, thinking about... So I'm going to throw another term out that I learned somewhere. We're also, I guess, on the cusp of the Anthropocene.
Right.
Yeah, and that's a real word.
Yeah, that's a
real
real
good.
word.
Okay.
As with everything academic, people argue about it, but
yes,
it is a term that seems to be used widespread and somewhat agreed upon that it is a term.
Yes, I tell my lit theory students, this is an ongoing conversation. And
exactly.
You're joining it, which is blowing the... no, knowledge is not a fixed thing. We're still figuring stuff out. Yes, we have AI. Yes, we have, the internet, but we're still learning stuff. And so think about what does it mean to be drawn to that work on the cusp of whatever's going to happen next. For the planet, for the planet.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different aspects to that question. One of the characteristics of my work is that some of it does have applications in decision making, whether that's habitat restoration or conservation, which obviously conditions are going to be changing a lot, and they are changing a lot. But some of what I've learned, especially some of the more theoretical, these are the processes that influence regeneration. So now we know that this is a limiting factor. That can then be followed up by, all right, we know this is a limiting factor in forest diversity. Is there anything we can do to maybe help that along? And that has a lot of applications in times of widespread and very fast change. So one of the examples of this is in our forests, trees get all the attention a lot of times, but 80% of the plant diversity is the ground layer flora, so the wildflowers, the ferns, the herbaceous layer, ground layer plants. And this is the layer that shows especially strong and long-lasting legacy effects of past disturbance, past agriculture, in young forests, especially those that are regenerated on cultivated land. A lot of the species really don't come back for a very long time. So many of our most beloved and ecologically important and culturally important in many cases understory species might still be missing in a forest that's 100 years old on land that was previously cultivated. So things like wild leeks, trilliums, wild ginger, a lot of beloved species. But we know that part of the reason for this is because they just can't get to these sites. A lot of these species are dispersed, their seeds are dispersed by ants, or they don't really have a mechanism for moving long distances in short periods of time. So if they've been eliminated from this site through agriculture, it's going to take a really long time for them to come back. But that also could be a problem that offers opportunities in terms of reintroduction and restoration of these populations. And there's a number of people working on these questions to figure out, can you successfully reintroduce these species and speed up the process? For some species, the answer does appear to be yes. So maybe that could also be applied for increasing diversity in young forests, but also for helping species migrate with climate change, or just increasing the biological integrity of sites that we have that we're stewarding currently where that's been lost.
Wow. And so you also have this interest in industrial sites and post-industrial sites, which it seems to be a very Western Pennsylvania
right.
thing to care about. Which, I mean, what is that? You know, I'm thinking about, I know you post on your Instagram story, like, pictures of the slag heaps.
Oh, yeah.
and even, like, the SEPTA train.
Yes.
Stuff. Like, what does that look like when you have at least, I in my brain, I'm thinking, like, well, at least agriculture, there's still dirt there.
Right, exactly.
There's still some soil there that has been messed with, perhaps fertilized, but it's still soil.
Well, there's a term for this. When you have an urban site where you have, say, like, concrete building, a trash pile, a slag heap, which is really just a very large and specialized trash pile, the term we use for this would be called a novel substrate. So the substrate is whatever the plants are growing in. Soil is a type of substrate.
Oh.
Slag can also be a substrate. And we call these novel urban substrates, novel urban habitats. And there's a lot that goes on in them that's really similar to what goes on, for example, a lava flow after a volcano erupts. Similar setting. We call this process of plants establishing on sites that did not have plants or soil previously. It's called primary succession, and that's the fancy name for the process by which different species will come in and colonize these sites, change the environment a little bit. Other species will come in and colonize, and then other species will come, and you'll get change and development of these communities through time. And one of the things that I like a lot about industrial sites is that you can see these processes happen right in front of you. So at the slag heap, the story with the slag heap is I knew that there were slag heaps here and I wanted to visit them, but I hadn't yet. In 2020, I finally made it down there, and the top of the slag heap is this sort of savanna-like community with all these cool weedy plants that can tolerate very nutrient-poor, very hot, and very dry sites. If you're going to visit the slag heap, as an aside, I would recommend doing it after 5 p.m. if it's a sunny day, because it gets extremely hot up there.
Oh, wow.
Plants aren't necessarily happy about that, just like humans aren't, so that limits what can grow up there. But there's all of these scattered single trees in the site growing in the savanna. And if you look at the base of these scattered trees, they're all got these clusters of shrubs and vines and other woody plants growing under them that are not growing elsewhere in the savanna. So that's a process called facilitation, which is a positive relationship between plants. So in this case, those trees there, we could call them nurse trees, are allowing the shrubs and other species to grow underneath them, because they're either changing the environment by providing shade or keeping the site moister longer, or in some cases facilitating dispersal. You know, birds come and sit in the tree canopy and they excrete seeds that they ate, and then that is a seed source for these shrubs, most of which are fleshy fruited and bird dispersed. But this facilitation process is something that I'm really interested in, and I've studied it in the context of post-agricultural forests too. So when I saw this with these single trees very obviously facilitating early in this succession process, I was like, I need to work on this. So I went up there on an afternoon with a bunch of notebooks and some simple tools for measuring things, and counted a bunch of stuff, and published a paper on it, and have another one in the works and some other projects going in there. It just all kind of came together.
Wow. So there's a place I have a compulsion I want to take you to in Nanny Glow, Pennsylvania.
Ooh, that sounds good.
Which is literally Welsh for seams of coal.
Yes, awesome.
When I was a college student 25 years, speaking of seeing it in real time now, think about when I was in college 25 years ago, I was in that region, and I took slides of, like, when I was leaving, I was like, I'm never coming back to this part of the world ever again, which was dumb. But I took slides, and in Nanny Glow, there used to be the city skyline was a slag heap.
Whoa.
It was black. And I one of the things we started doing during the pandemic was to just get out of, this is a very lovely house, but, and it's like, well, we know the mountain and we know places with public bathrooms that we can get to without humans and buying gas without humans and all of that. And we started going, and there's a rails to trail site. The Ghost Town Trail goes through Nanny
I've been on part of that near Indiana.
Okay. So further up, if you go past Blairsville, you eventually get to Nantyglow. And I when we took the back road into Nantyglow, I thought, well, we're going to see the Black Mountain again. And it was green. And it blew my mind. I was like, wait, was it not here? I mean, it actually took me 2 or 3 times going to the Ghost Town Trail to go, oh no, that's the slag heap. There's
Awesome.
There's no trees growing on it, but it is green now.
Cool.
I have pictures of the green. Actually, I'll show you when we're done recording, because it is like, yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it did happen in my lifetime.
Yeah.
It also, like, hear you talk, it's so fascinating because it's like oh god, I'm actually at a loss for words. The wildness of life, or the idea of just life is just cannot be stopped.
Right, there's so many different processes and weird things that can happen, and that's one of the things that's really fun about it, is that, like, there's certain times things can be kind of predictable, but the motto in ecology is basically it depends, because everything is influenced by everything else, and it's really just infinite possibilities.
That's wild. And to think about then your acts of recording. And I think about acts of recording doing scientific research, but then also the how that transitions into the art that you make. And, you know, and thinking about, and I know, like, maybe the institution I teach at, and isn't this all of academia at this point now? There's, like, the two solitudes. There's, like, science, and then, like, whatever the heck everybody else is doing. And that you do both, and that there's an interrelation there in terms of, like, when you do drawings of leaves and you do embroidery of plant species, like leaves and stuff, like how those two processes of doing that sort of, like, hard biological research and art are interrelated.
Yeah, and fundamentally, a lot of what I'm exploring with both are similar types of questions. So in my research, zooming out, some of the things that interest me most are pattern at different spatial and temporal scales, pattern in space and time. And that's the same kind of patterns and processes that I tend to explore in my embroidery too. So, like, I'll do larger pieces that have a whole bunch of different leaves on them, and that relates to some sort of spatial pattern. So, like, I've done gradient pieces where I have a whole bunch of different oak leaves, and they're arranged along the type of moisture gradient that you see when you're going up and down a slope, where you have certain species at the top that live in the driest areas, and then you go mid-slope and you have some different ones, and then down at the bottom where it's wet you have different ones. So I've done large panel pieces exploring some of those environmental gradient and spatial pattern ideas, as well as other kinds of relationships in space and time. A lot of times I'll do pieces with leaves from particular sites, for example. So they might be related to, like, a particular research site or just a particular place, and might be exploring relationships between species within that particular place. One of my recent ones that I did earlier this year too was very, very directly intertwined with my research, because I work with pasture trees in post-agricultural forests. These are large, individual, spreading trees with branches poking out in all directions in the middle of a forest of dense, small stems. They're also called wolf trees, and that's something that I study a lot. I've collected leaves from all of the wolf trees that I used in my study that I did back in 2018 on them, which is the first single tree ecology study I did, and arranged them into a single piece, the embroidered versions of leaves from all of these trees, and it came with a, like, brochure booklet type thing with portraits of each individual tree and, like, what species it is and where it's from.
Wow, that's cool. And And I guess thinking about punk too, in a way. So in a way, like also in a way this works so something like Shining Navigation will have images of the natural world, overlacing, or providing the border for like a picture of the Rock Room, which seems like the most unnatural place on the planet. Not that there's not life in there happening.
Oh yes.
Maybe not that anybody wants to deal with that life. But I mean the way that punk is a reclaiming of, isn't it? Like, I mean, is that the same thing, or for you, does that feel like sort of the same, also part of this formula?
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of similarity, and whether it's in terms of like punk uses a lot of the same kind of novel urban habitats that I study. When I was in undergrad, one of the places that I got really interested in some of these like pattern formation processes was an abandoned court. It was a tennis court, not a basketball court, but so shows that the courts make perfect sense to me.
Yes.
But also like I feel like there is a relationship in a lot of different ways, and there's a lot of these really cool connections between punk and botany and ecology that you might not be aware of on the surface at first, but I've met so many people who do both. And so there's a lot of ways and settings in which they kind of really seamlessly blend with each other. And also because like the corner of punk that I'm really most in, one of the reasons that I felt at home there was because there was this sense of like expressed care for the rest of the world and interest in the rest of the world. And I think that those things fit really well together too.
That's fascinating. And I guess like what in terms of reclaim spaces, care for the world, I guess there's also at least what punk is now, or hopefully at its best what punk is now, like this respect for, I guess, diversity and sort of thinking about biodiversity in the same way.
Right, and also just that sense of like different possibilities too, because in ecology there's surprises all the time. Some things are roughly predictable, but random things are a major part of what's happening, and that's part of the fun of it. And also I feel like with punk, when it's at its best, and it is what I think it should be, there's also that sense of like we can make things possible. We can do different things. We can have, there's still room for surprises and chaos and all that, and we can apply that too.
Yeah, and I guess, is it also thinking about the way in which the biological reclaiming of spaces and punk also against, as a refuge, as a limit, as a bull, I don't know, against, I guess, like industrialized capitalism, which can, I guess, consume us all and kill us all.
Right, very true. And also, like, some of the processes, too, I think there's a lot of crossover between. So, like, when you have facilitation, a lot of times where that happens is in these nutrient-poor habitats. Plants can compete with each other, too. But the relative importance of whether they're competing or facilitating partially depends on, their environment around them. So when you're in a desert or a lava flow or a slag heap and you have two plants growing next to each other, it can actually be more advantageous to grow next to another plant because you can facilitate each other. Whereas in a nutrient-rich habitat, it might be more beneficial to have more space between you. But I think that there's a lot of parallels there with how we can assemble our own communities. And, we would certainly live in what can be considered a nutrient-poor environment in a lot of ways. And being close to others and facilitating each other, obviously for us it's more of a choice. But I think that that's something that we could also think more about, how do we do this? If it's good for the plants in these nutrient-poor environments and these slag heaps, like, we could do that too. And I feel like a lot of these communities that assemble, whether it's punk or a lot of other, like, subcultural and countercultural communities, are basically ways of us doing that, whether it's conscious or not.
Yeah. Versus, like, Disney World, where all the lakes are cleaned by pesticides.
Right. And, like, I think of this, too, in the context of, like, the ecology community and the scientific community in general, which can be really competitive and nasty and cutthroat and joyless. And I'm like...
Yeah, academia, yes.
Yeah, and I'm like, we don't have to do this. Like, we can facilitate each other's growth and interest in these disciplines and research. We don't have to be hyper-competitive and cutting each other down, especially considering we are in, a very... nutrient-poor environment in the world of academia and ecology. Like, let's just rethink this whole thing.
Is that something that gives you hope?
Yes and no. I mean, in a lot of ways it feels like a perennially losing battle, but I think the battle itself is important, even if you don't win.
Yeah. I'm trying not to give in to cynicism.
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean? Try not to give in to both about academia, both about the Anthropocene, about global warming, about, thinking about, too... I have this, like, very stalled book project that kind of explores, like, how even our scope of our imagination has been sort of redefined by the Reagan Revolution.
Right.
And that, like, really, actually, other people are the worst thing ever, but also the thing that I think we deeply crave more than anything else.
Right.
Which is what keeps me going to punk shows and keeps me, there's a time after my graduate school coursework where I was, like, around a lot of people and then I wasn't. And was just hopelessly depressed for years and years and years. And then suddenly, the last show I went to, you were one of, 24 people I had to say goodbye to at the end of the night.
Right.
I was like, I'm coming home, but I gotta say goodbye to people. This could take a minute. And it was 30 minutes saying goodbye. But that was actually so wonderful.
It is. And, it's great when it happens like that, too. Because, I went to this fest in the woods in Washington back in August, and it's I kind of know a couple people who are going to be here, but I ended up just meeting so many people and making so many new friends there and everything, and that sense of possibility, and you don't already know everything that's going to happen. There's still room for all kinds of exciting new happy things, even though life sucks a lot of the times. I think is really, really important.
Yeah, and I think when that happens in punk, when, just something weird happens or something funny happens or... I think back to that No Time... I'm going to screw up the French. Squillette, Brenda. I mean, just everybody... At the end of the night, it was like the Skinhead show, and everybody was laughing.
Yeah, that was so fun.
That was so fun, and I was like, these songs, these bands are going to be aggressive, and it's going to be good. And then everybody was just full of joy by the end of the night. We were just, bumping into each other in the mosh pit, falling down, and still laughing on the floor, and...
Yeah, that was awesome. That was one of my favorite shows I've been to this year.
Definitely. And I don't know, life is a thing, isn't it?
For sure.
Sorry, that was my So let's go to the rundown. So Shiny Navigate. So how do people find out about stuff and things and follow you? Because you just do fast. I always look forward to every issue of Shining Navigation. So what is actually, I'm talking about, what is Shining Navigation?
It's a zine I do that's a photo zine. There's no writing in it. I write a lot in every other format, era of, aspect of my life. So after I've been writing manuscripts for hours, the last thing I want to do is write a zine too. So both the zines I've done have just been strictly visual, show photos and decorative stuff. This is the one that I do that comes out roughly every other month. It's one large page that you fold out and look at. And I actually started doing zines as kind of an outgrowth of doing flyers because I really, really liked doing cut and paste flyers. I didn't get to do them very often. And I'd always kind of thought, maybe I'll do a zine sometime. And then I started doing it and it just became a regular part of life. I started doing it when I lived in Athens, Ohio for grad school. I did a different zine in a slightly different format with a different name. And then I moved up here and decided to switch formats and names and switch to the single fold-out page instead of half-size multiple pages because it's cheaper. Yeah. So I can just like leave them around and let people take them. I don't have to be like, can I please have $1 to recoup my printing costs? Because the printing costs are like manageable.
Yeah. So there's that. There is... So you've joined Weaponized Existence.
As of like a week and a half ago.
You'd post on Instagram about like playing bass again and being in a band again. And so, which I guess is like, isn't at its best. See, I even hate to call it a utopian vision, but this like, no, it's not a utopian. So here's the thing. I use this quote a lot. I lean on this quote so much. I said this quote in class yesterday. There's a line in Deep Ecology built by Bill McKibben where he talks about, and McKibben's fascinating because he was like a minister who's now an environmental activist, and he does this like super annoying, amazing thing. It's annoying because I can't do it when he writes, that he can like kind of like, not on your level, but like kind of discuss the scientific, but then also like sort of the social and the ecological and the sociological and even sometimes the theological, all at the same time in the same paragraph. And it's like, how can you do that? How can you do all 5 things at once in one paragraph? I hate you, Bill McKibben. Though Bill McKibben is amazing, and he's a really nice guy, and he does answer his own emails if you email him with a question. Like, literally, you said something. Where was this source? And he's like, it's on page 36 of. And I was like, thank you, Mr. McKibben.
That's
you know
right.
what I mean? It's amazing, And he's like, and I'm in China, like looking at what they're doing to their environment. But he said about how, it's like people, maybe because I work on a campus, people hauled the candle for their college years, not because they found their coursework particularly interesting, but it was the one time most adult Americans live as people evolve to live, which is on top of one another.
That makes a lot of sense.
In close proximity of one another. But, we have the modern nuclear family and the sort of... He also has the line, it was in conjunction with thinking about McMansions and somebody saying, once we realized we were building homes for people who couldn't stand the thought of living under the same roof, we all got rich.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Which is a very unhealthy human thing that does really weird shit to people.
Yeah. Oh boy, I could do like a whole nother podcast about all my weird, intimate experiences with that exact problem, but I digress.
Yeah. No, I get to, I mean, it's like hell is other people. I mean, I just had a, punk scene friend breakup too. It was weird. That happens too. But also then I wouldn't give being part of the scene and knowing people and knowing half a dozen people. I don't know if I'm ready to be in a band. I don't think I want to be in a band. My music project is a solo thing. Because also it's like, I'm busy and can't have band practice.
Yeah. There's so many different, like, caveats and like ways that being in bands can be really difficult, and I think that's part of why I haven't done it as much as I might have liked to, because like finding people that you get along with well enough to be in a band, want to play at least somewhat the same kind of music, have a compatible schedule, have time, have interest, play compatible instruments, it's difficult. And the first band I was in was when I was in grad school, and it was just like a completely random thing where you had a couple people who were like, hey, let's play, you want to come? And I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot, and it all worked out and turned into a real band. But a lot of times, you might talk about it with people, but it never actually happens, or you talk about it for a couple of years and then it actually happens after you've moved away, so you can't be involved in it anymore, things like that.
Yeah, I have 2 shows myself coming up next month, and I haven't touched an instrument since, I don't know, July?
Right.
But Theramonster is totally an active thing. It's totally a real thing. And maybe I'll play that again. Or I'll touch an instrument again I guess I have to before the 16th of October. At least once. I don't know. But so there's that. But there's also, embroidery and drawing too. Like how to, because I know you do you do sell things and do punk flea markets and stuff. Is there a way that and you do have, and I will link them on the website, craft specific or art specific, I should say, Instagram accounts, but
yeah. So I do have a separate account for embroidery stuff, and that is Skunk Cabbage Swamp with underbars in between. And that's where you can find photos of stuff. I treat it mostly like a portfolio photo dump place. It's not a content mill. I don't post a million stories every day. I post new work on there when it's ready. The algorithm doesn't like that. You probably won't see it very regularly if you follow the account. So I recommend just like going and looking at stuff more than using it like a typical Instagram account. Just go and scroll through, see if you find something you like. I do customs a lot, and custom commissions are often my favorite work because they get me out of my comfort zone. I'll have a list a mile long of things I might want to embroider, but then somebody asks me about a different species I maybe have never heard of before, and then it turns into a whole fun adventure of what is this? How can I translate it to embroidery? So that's always super awesome. And the best way to get in touch with me for that would be to just either message me on there, or I have a Tumblr for it too, which is Allegheny Fever Dreams, all one word, and that's got my email in the bio, so email also works.
Sorry, I'm just writing that down so I remember to post that link, which actually now is cool. Spotify lets you hot link. If you put a hot link in a description, people can, when they look at things on Spotify, click on it and go there.
Cool. So,
which is, I think, a brand new adventure. Which reminds me also, I have those two giant, sexy sycamore trees out front.
Yes.
Which I definitely want. I mean, I hope those trees outlive me. I mean, in an urban environment, that's, I think, tough, but I hope they outlive me.
Tough but not impossible.
Tough but not impossible. There's actually an area. There used to be on a website an aerial photograph of all of Pittsburgh, and there's a picture of this house in 1936, and the trees were just babies.
Awesome.
It was so sweet. I mean, they were kind of even with the roof line of the house then. They are not that anymore.
Right.
And I love them so much. Even if some of my neighbors don't, I will fight them to keep those trees alive. God damn it.
That's the spirit.
That is the spirit, and you got Pete the pear tree out back and stuff. So that should show you Pete. Somehow there's dogs in the way though. But I think, is there anything else I forgot? Anything you forgot?
Oh, I always forget something.
Yeah.
I got too much going on. There's always something that escapes.
Yeah, which is also, again, you're like, oh, I'm going to go to Philly for this show, I'm going to go to Athens for this show, and yeah, that's great and amazing and wonderful.
I do go to Athens a lot. There's not shows there that often, but I managed to catch one on my most recent trip down totally randomly. I didn't even know it was happening until I was already in Athens, and then I saw flyers for it, and that's one of the things that's fun, is when you go somewhere and end up at some event completely randomly that you didn't plan on, and Athens is pretty good for that. There's always some random weird thing happening.
Fantastic. I've never been. All right, so I'll have links to all of that, and we're not done yet because it is now time for the bottom five. Bottom five is a series of questions not related to our main topic that are of a surrealistic and or philosophical nature. Are you ready?
I'll give it a shot.
All right, question one. It's the question everybody gets the first time they're on this podcast, which you haven't listened yet, so this is going to be a surprise. But as a biologist, I think you will do well. If reincarnation is real, and you had to come back as an infectious disease or illness, what kind of disease or illness would you choose to be?
Let's see. There's a lot of interesting plant diseases that are fungi that have weird life cycles. So I'd probably come back as one of them, because if you have a weird life cycle where you've got 4 different spore stages and each stage has a different host, you get to interact with a lot of different hosts. That means different plant species, different environments. So the idea of hopping around to different places and exploring, so to speak, as a pathogen sounds like fun.
That is Wow, everybody else is just like, I want to be the common cold or gut bacteria. So that's the best answer. I might have to retire that question.
Of course
now.
I have to go with a fungus, right?
I have to go with a fungus, yeah.
Don't ask me which one. I'd have to see which one has the host plants that I like best. But one of the ones with multiple hosts.
Okay, fantastic. Question 2, which isn't really a question, but a prompt. Tell me a happy but somewhat unremarkable memory of your childhood.
Let's see. I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house, which was in central Pennsylvania, in Lock Haven, for anybody who knows where that is. That was sort of my second hometown as a kid, because we spent a lot of time up there. And so something that I remember very fondly, but it's not exciting to most people, it would just be spending time in their yard. And they had a lot of really giant apple trees. And we used to try to climb them unsuccessfully and spend a lot of time, picnicking under the shade. Sometimes we would pick up apples. They weren't, amazing, but they were fine. And ever since then, I've just really been a big fan of seeing fruit trees covered with fruit. I think that brings back some sort of primal early life, yay, apples thing. Even though, confession, I don't actually like apples that much. I cook with them a lot, but I'm not somebody who's gonna pick up an apple and take a bite of it and be like, yes, I love this. It's not a favorite fruit, but apple trees covered with apples is a favorite sight.
Oh yeah, that is really cool. All right, question 3. This is the Christopher Hitchens question, because he said in Mortality, when he realized he was going to die, he's like, man, I was really looking forward to reading, I think it was Henry Kissinger and Cardinal Ratzinger's obituaries. And then he said, wait, I wanted to write those. So of the living villains of history, whose obituary would you most like to write? Living villain of history.
That I honestly have no idea for, because I'm not always super aware of who's still living and who's not. Let's say, so I went on this big British royal family kick after I watched The Crown, and because I didn't realize how ridiculous it was, and obviously with the caveat that is a drama series, it's not 100% factual. So me being an academic, one of the things I enjoy doing, I'll watch a historically based series, and it'll be all right, let's see what the inconsistencies are. But I think pretty much everybody in that family probably counts as a villain. And
yes.
The new guy, Prince Charles, I know he's technically king now, but he's still Prince to me.
Yes.
I could probably enjoy writing one for him, just to marvel at all of the outlandishness of the British royal family. I watched this stream on YouTube of the royal funeral from when Prince Philip died or whatever, and it just sent me on this morbid fascination of weird British royal family stuff. So that would be an opportunity to delve even further into that.
Yes, absolutely. Which you would have to mention, which was a very bad Saturday Night Live skit. But I guess when the Camilla Parker Bowles tapes were released, he said, I want to live as a tampon in your trousers forever.
Right.
Which, that's not good flirting.
No.
Question 4, which is another death question. What was I thinking when I circled this one? If there's a hell and you end up there, name one celebrity that you expect/hope to meet.
That I expect to meet. I don't know that I would say I would hope to meet any of the... Celebrities are a topic that I'm really woefully ignorant of. So let's just say any of those pervert actors that were creepy to their colleagues, and I the only reason I would hope to meet those would be so I could fight them, because hopefully they still have fights in hell. But I would expect to see them there because they're bad. Yes,
they are. Yes. All right, last one. This is a little nicer. Or a lot nicer. Question 5. You're almost through this. What mundane daily activity gives you the most joy?
I like washing dishes, which is a really unpopular opinion. I enjoy it. There's something relaxing about it. And then you see the pile shrink, but that's not even the fun part of it for me. I just enjoy standing, playing in water. It's a pleasant experience. I don't think about it very often, but then I do it and I'm all right, cool.
Yeah, no, and it is also, I think, as someone with also, I think, is a somewhat active mind who gets into a lot of things, to have like a low flow, like flow cognition, like just activity that you just flow through. It's like vacation. It's like brain vacation. Like
exactly.
The reason why this house is clean is because I had a really crappy day teaching on Wednesday.
Relatable.
And I was like, I'm going to come home and I just need to not... I'm just wiping. I'm wiping things. I shall wipe things. And then there will be no more wiping.
Right.
And I will feel better. Yes.
It's simple and you feel like you accomplished something, but you didn't really have to think about accomplishing it, and you didn't have to go through different stages, which I think is nice. It's simple. You like turn the water on, you soap the dish, you rinse it, you like set it off to dry, but it's not... So it's a process, but it's not a process with like a lot of different steps that you have to think about, which is nice because pretty much everything else I do has a million steps that you do need to think about a lot.
Yes. So... And there's no peer review.
Exactly.
There's
generally no feedback of any sort. I mean, if there's no stakes. If I only wash half the dish and I see it's dirty later, I just put it back in there and nobody's going to send me an angry email about it.
Yes, absolutely. No revise and... I guess you can choose your own revise and resubmit, which is what you just did there. Yes. All right. Well, I think that's about it. Our next episode will eventually happen, and it'll be about something. Our homepage where you can find new and old episodes is gonnadiepodcast.com. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, and anything that piggybacks on those three services. Our only social media page is Facebook. I guess I should get an Instagram and take a picture of me and the guest, but I don't want to do that. So we're not gonna. Special thanks to Andrew Fox for our lovely theme music. Thank you so much for our guest, Dr. Hazel. Thank you so much. That was so fascinating. I learned so much about something I know very little about.
Thank you for the invitation. It was really fun.
Brad, I'm glad. It's the narcissistic pleasure of being interviewed. That's the only thing I have to offer, really. But there will also be links to the Tumblr, to the Instagram, anything else you want to provide me with, I'll throw in the description. Later, meets.